Hi, I'm Pake Wise, the Hunter Education Coordinator for the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. This is our Learn to Hunt series. Today we're going to talk about predator control with Jerrod Davis here. So I'm going to let him introduce himself.
All right, like Pick said, my name is Jerrod Davis. I'm the Fur Bearer Program Coordinator with the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. I've been in this position for a little over 10 years, and my job really entails monitoring those fur bearer species throughout the season, and then analyzing the data after the end of the season to make sure that all of our harvest limits, bag limits, align with what the data tells us. So spend a lot of time looking at computer screens, looking at numbers, but also a lot of time in the field, talking to the trapper, talking to the predator hunter, the sportsman, sportswomen, and getting a feel for what they are seeing on the landscape, because they see a lot of different things that we don't get to see running a statewide program, and also the things that they may see as a added bonus, some type of new method or new trap style that our regulations may not address. So not only do I deal with the science and data side, I also deal with the regulatory side for what our sportsmen and sportswomen are able to use out in the field.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think that's something that's pretty important for the sports people out there, is to understand that there's a lot more of them than there are of us. And what they see on a day-to-day basis is very valuable to what we do.
yeah, 100%. That's why we have all these surveys. We have our game harvest survey. We have our big game survey. We have all of these different surveys because we know how valuable that information is, and we have to utilize it, because if not, there's no way that we could go out and get all of that.
Yeah, there's no way that you, as the fur bear biologist, can cover the entire state and know exactly what's going on.
Exactly. Oklahoma is so diverse from each four corners, even to the central part of the state. It's so diverse that what affects one region isn't going to affect the other region, and we just need to know how those things are all playing in, the big picture.
Yep. So cool. So what made you want to pursue a career in wildlife?
So I always knew that I wanted to be outside with animals, doing something along those lines. I went to college at Oklahoma State University, got my degree in wildlife and fisheries ecology, and initially got an internship doing a black bear research study in southeastern Oklahoma. So that really kind of ignited my interest in the biology side of it. But my first job with the agency was as a game warden. So I was in law enforcement division for 8.5 years before I transferred over to wildlife division. And it just was, the switch kind of happened just as more of a better fit for me personally. So, but in the last 10 years, I've really enjoyed what I've been doing on the wildlife division side. So, but the reason for wanting to get into wildlife conservation, I grew up in the outdoors. I was lucky enough to have some property to do that on, and experience those things. And, it's kind of cliche, but, wanting to preserve that for the future, for my kids and my grandkids to go out and enjoy the same things that I did. So I see the value in that. And, it kind of pushes me on those times where you're like, man, I'm really getting rung over the coals over this or that. But those types of things are really, that is what keeps your focus on the conservation side.
Yeah. You say it's cliche, and I guess it is, because people say it all the time about wanting to preserve that for future generations, but it's extremely important.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of, I'm pretty sure that's in our mission statement.
Yeah.
If not, it probably needs to be.
Things are cliche for a reason.
Right,
so,
yeah.
But all right, well, let's kind of get into the meat here. So like I said, we're going to talk about some predator management or predator control. So, why is that? Why is predator management important?
So in Oklahoma, I'm going to kind of try and break it down a little bit. Try not to get too far into the weeds, but in Oklahoma, we really do what's called mesopredator control or mesocarnivore control, because we as humans have already taken out those apex predators, those top predators. We had wolves, we had mountain lions, we had black bears, and even further back, we had other species of bears. But removing that top layer allowed those mesocarnivores, those middle carnivores, to really flourish. And that type of effect, we don't really know overall, like what kind of effect that really had on the prey species and the prey populations in Oklahoma. You know, your game birds, any type, a lot of some of your fish species, some of your reptiles and amphibians. I mean, the fur bearer species in Oklahoma run a very wide array of habitat generalists and dietary generalists that they're out there on the landscape eating all kinds of stuff. So, you know, trying to put a lid back onto that
Yep.
as far as allowing that population expansion, and get it back to a good balance. And I think that's probably the key to all of it is getting that balance, keeping that balance between you know, the predator and the prey relationship on the landscape. So I mean that's probably the biggest thing with predator control is just maintaining that balance to where you're getting peak efficiency for the resource for the prey species and for the predator species as well.
Yeah. What are some examples of some of those meso species you were talking about?
So I mean in Oklahoma we've got river otter, which is probably the most recent success story in Oklahoma.
Hmm.
We've got raccoons, we've got possums, we've got badgers. I mean, it runs mink, and we have a couple of records of weasels in Oklahoma, skunks, coyotes, bobcats. I mean, bobcats are probably the most highly sought after in the trapping world, just due to the the monetary aspect of their pelts.
Yeah.
But which is another reason why we have to monitor these animals really closely, because you know the overexploitation has been a thing in our past.
In the very recent past with
Yeah.
commercial harvest.
Right.
Yep. So
So I mean that's one of the reasons why our agency exists is to keep a very close eye on those things.
okay, cool. What of those species, which ones are the most affected due to the lack of control? Like which ones are most likely to kind of explode there?
So I mean, like I said, a lot of them are going to be your habitat generalists, but for the most part, I mean, raccoons are they're a very highly densely populated species in Oklahoma. Um, in certain settings, you'll have large populations of coyotes. You'll have large populations of fox in certain areas. So it's mainly probably the two that pop off in my head is probably the coyotes and raccoons would be the two that have just, as far as their expansion across Oklahoma and their densities in Oklahoma, those would be the two that really jump off the paper at me.
Yeah, and I would venture to say, because you've already kind of said it, but they're habitat generalists. They'll eat pretty much anything they can, and they're both highly intelligent. They're both very intelligent animals, so they're very good at adapting to new environments. So, okay, well, what kind of licensing does one need?
So in Oklahoma, with our with our Modernization Act, for pursuing fur bearers either through trapping or through predator calling, all you need is a hunting license. So
Oh, okay.
it used to be a couple of 3 or 4 separate licenses, but with our Modernization Act, we pared that down to just a hunting license.
Okay. And then I know when you get into trapping, there's 1,000 different kinds of traps and styles and sets and stuff. Is there any that are illegal? You can't use those?
Yeah. So in Oklahoma currently, there are 2 styles of traps that are completely illegal, and those are cable restraints and snares. So those are the wire devices that have a loop in them that restrict around the neck. Now on public land, you can't use body gripping traps, which are those are more of an aquatic. They were manufactured to be a semi-aquatic trap, but you can use those on private land, and that was recently passed, I think, in the last couple of years. So, but yeah, snares and cable restraints are currently illegal in Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, let's jump into fur bearers versus quote unquote nuisance species. Can you kind of dive into that?
Yeah, and they can be one and the same in a lot of instances.
Because I think a lot of it's going to be perception.
A lot of it is perception, but as far as the letter of the law or as it states in regulations, an animal becomes a nuisance when it causes monetary loss or it risks health or human safety.
Okay.
Human health and safety. Sorry. So um, if you have a beaver that's causing impoundment or damming a stream or a creek near a house that's causing some flooding issues. If you've got coyotes that are being a problem for your sheep or goats or during calving season, those would be considered nuisance species. And there's multiple avenues to address those
Mhm.
in regulation. If it has to do with livestock loss, you can, of course, you can always take care of the problem yourself. Um, but there is another agency. It's called Wildlife Services. They're a branch of the USDA that they deal with a lot of livestock depredation issues. And then there's also nuisance wildlife control operators, which they're private businesses that are licensed through our agency to take care of nuisance issues, like raccoons that are tearing up the attic, or
Mhm.
squirrels that have climbed in your vents and are causing all kinds of ruckus. Um, but then, of course, like I said, there's always, in all of those situations, when an animal is deemed a nuisance, the landowner is well within their rights to take care of the problem themselves if they have the knowledge and the equipment and the know how to do it.
Okay, cool. So, all right, so I've kind of figured out, all right, I know what licensing I need. I know what kind of traps I can use. Where do I go? Where can I trap?
Wherever you got permission. I mean, that's the great thing about Oklahoma. We've got a lot of public land that's open for trapping. Always check the regulations to make sure that where you're going
Yep.
is legal to be. But private land is we're majority private land in Oklahoma, so getting that access sometimes um, is difficult, but it's a lot easier. I think it's a lot easier now than it probably was in the recent past. Um, Trapping has had a bad rap for a long time.
Mhm.
Everybody gets that thought of the fox and the hound with the big
Yeah.
the tooth traps that are
Big bear
breaking
traps. Yeah.
legs and stuff. I mean, those types of traps have been outlawed and not able to be used for a century. So,
Yeah.
learning that there's millions of dollars of research that has gone into the types of traps that are on the landscape now, the efficiency that they have for the species that they're designed to catch, the um, they even monitor the damage there's studies about the damage that they cause, and if if the damage meets a certain threshold, then those types of traps are not recommended. So I
Mhm.
mean, there's this a lot of research and a lot of studies that go into not just the efficiency, but the overall animal well-being of an
Mhm.
animal in trap. Because these traps are they're designed to restrain the animal. They're not designed to hurt the animal. If I, as a trapper, if I don't want to harvest that animal, or if it's a non-target catch, I want to be able to release it and
Yeah.
go about your business. Which on private land and public land, you deal with that a lot because neighbors'
Mhm.
dogs or wild
Yep.
cats. You're setting a trap for a coyote, and a bobcat comes along, or I mean, there's a lot of different instances where there's that ability to release the animal out of the trap, and you want to be able to have that option. Um, that was a little bit of a rabbit hole. I'm sorry. Going back to your question as far as like where you can trap.
Yeah.
Um, Private land is probably your best bet.
Mhm.
Um, Public land, we have a lot of access for public trapping, but I call them the gateway trap. It's kind of like the gateway drug. It's enclosed trigger traps, the raccoon specific traps. You see a farmer that's got a barn out there, and you're like, "Hey, you have any problem with raccoons getting in your feed or anything like that?" And he says, "Yeah, like I can I can take care of that
Yep.
problem for you." Oh, I'm worried about my dog. I'm worried about this or that. Well, this trap here is specifically designed for raccoons, and you show them how it works. So now you're becoming an ambassador for the
Mhm.
sport, um, and you gain that access. And then you potentially have the access. That you have the potential at that point in time to further your access on this
Yeah.
property. Well, hey, I noticed that you've got some cattle and calving seasons coming up. Would you like for me to try and thin out your predator population? You know, there's that's why I call them the gateway trap, is because it just opens so many doors that really wouldn't be there before.
Yep.
So,
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's kind of where I was going next. Is if we talked about sometimes it's hard to get access into places,
mhm.
especially private property. That could be an avenue.
Oh,
Say,
yeah.
hey, you can explain to them the benefits of predator management,
Mhm.
and then you say, hey, I'll come in and trap this year, and we'll see how that works. And then
Right.
next year, hey, can I deer hunt? Or
Well, and even guys that have deer leases. I mean, good, bad, or ugly, everybody, most deer hunters in Oklahoma have deer feeders.
mhm,
And what do they get more pictures of on their deer feeders than anything? And that's
those
raccoons. And
bandits.
yeah, usually like spinning the motors
Hmm.
and getting the corn to come out or breaking the equipment. So I mean, you get some of these raccoon specific traps and put them around your deer feeder, and
Yep.
I mean now you've saved money in corn and what you spent on the traps, and you're doing a service for some of your ground nesting birds in the area.
Yeah.
Because there's some research that shows that the artificial explosion of mesopredator populations around deer feeders has an effect on ground nesting birds, because you increase the number of predators in an area, you're increasing the likelihood of them finding a nest or
Yep.
finding a hen of some sort to eat. So
Yeah.
there's all kinds of, I mean, there are a lot of rabbit holes that I'm trying not to dive down in right now, because we could make this a whole series.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talk about some of that stuff, and and coming back to kind of like perception, right?
Mhm.
I think one species that gets a bad rap, and somewhat justified maybe, but are coyotes, right?
Yeah. I mean, coyotes definitely, like you said, they get a bad rap, and it's somewhat justified. I think a lot of it is wrong place, wrong time.
Hmm.
There are definitely verified instances of coyotes taking down cattle or calves. Was it a healthy cow? Was it a healthy calf? Was it a stillborn calf? Who knows? All you saw was the coyote eating
Yep.
or there is evidence of a canine attack
Hmm.
on livestock.
Yep.
And honestly, I have a easier time believing that it was a pack of wild dogs than coyotes sometimes. Um, but I mean, yeah, coyotes definitely get a bad rap, and I think some of the focus that we've put on harvesting coyotes or managing coyote populations probably hasn't done us the service that we think it has. I think in some instances it might even have a negative effect on how their influence in that habitat or that specific ecosystem. I think it might even have a negative influence on that, as opposed to we're thinking that it has a positive influence.
Yeah. Well, and you talk to landowners, and like I said, especially ranchers, and their thing is that no coyote is a good coyote, right?
Right.
And so and I get why they think that,
Mhm.
because they're trying to protect their calves, they're trying to protect their livelihood. But there's a lot of people out there that say, If we could just get rid of coyotes, our deer population is going to do a lot better, our turkeys
Right.
are going to do a lot better." And in a vacuum, maybe in an
Yeah.
ideal world, that probably is right.
Right.
But we don't live in an ideal world.
Yeah.
And you're just never going to get rid of them all. I mean, that's the
No.
part of it.
Well, and think about it. Earlier I talked about those apex predators. Now,
Mhm.
granted, human influence on removing those apex predators was pretty influential, but coyotes outcompeted all of those apex
Yep.
predators as far as range expansion and everything else. So now, I mean, we've got them in every county of the state, and we've had them in every county of the state for I don't know how long, but yeah, we've got to learn to live with them and learn to manage them to the best of our capabilities. No coyote is a good coyote, but I say my theory is if you're not having problems with the coyotes,
Yes,
then it's a good,
exactly.
then why are you why are you taking those non-problematic coyotes out of the equation?
They haven't
Now you've created a vacuum that who knows what's going to fill it.
exactly.
So that's kind of the thought that is starting to develop. Or we're trying to start to develop, trying to do some research to at least answer some of the questions that we have about the impact of coyotes on the landscape. I mean, because we're not going to get rid of them.
No.
So we just need to learn how to manage them the most effective way.
Yep.
And I don't think that, just blindly harvesting coyotes, blindly killing coyotes is that most effective way. So,
Yep. So, all right. Well, climb back up out of that rabbit hole.
okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Let's talk about traps themselves.
Okay.
What can you talk to us about the different kinds of styles, different sets? All
Yeah,
that kind of
certainly.
stuff?
So, we'd already talked about the enclosed trigger traps, which I said are specifically designed for raccoons. You're going to get some off catch with skunks and possums potentially, but the way they're designed is for raccoons. Then you have your foothold traps, which
Mhm.
those are the kind that the big bear traps that people think of whenever they hear the word trap. But those foothold traps now are designed with offsets. They're designed with certain poundages and sizes. I mean, different brands have different sizes, and every one of them is called a different thing. You
Yeah.
have your Minnesota brand 550, 450, 650, and you're like, well, what does that even mean when you put it up against a Bridger number 2 and trying to figure out what all
Yeah.
this means. Even being 10 years into it and actively trapping for 8 of those years, I still don't know. I mean, I know my brand, I know my go-to, and I know what those are BMP certified to, best management practice certified to target. So sorry. There's the enclosed trigger trap. You have your footholds, which they come in 3 separate styles. They come in a single spring, a double spring, and a coil spring. All of those are legal in Oklahoma, but if it's a double spring or a coil spring, it has to have that offset
Okay.
because they just have enough. They have enough force and enough closing power that you want to allow some room there. You don't want that metal on metal contact. We have they're allowed to use body grips and water sets only on private land. So those are the only traps that are allowed for use in Oklahoma that are designed to dispatch the animal on catch.
Mm-hmm.
All the other styles of traps in Oklahoma that we allow are considered restraining traps. You, the harvester, are the one that decides whether or not that animal is the one that you want to take.
Okay.
The good thing about the body gripping traps is the way that you set them, where you put them is very species specific. I mean, you're not going to get a raccoon diving in a beaver slide.
Yeah.
I mean, and then of course probably the most common one that most everybody knows are the cage traps, your live traps.
Yeah.
Which a lot of your nuisance issues are solved with those types of. A lot of your urban nuisance issues are solved with your live traps.
Yeah, your raccoon that's in your attic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. And then, okay, well, on that, let's say I live in the middle of Oklahoma City and I get a possum that's moved underneath my house and I go out there and catch him with a live trap.
Mhm.
What do I do then?
Oh man. Hopefully, somebody out in the country that you can get permission to put them on. Whew. So with possums specifically, there's really not a whole lot of regulations there's not any regulations on moving that animal because we're not concerned with disease spread with possums. They're some of the cleanest critters as it relates to disease. But you start getting into our rabies vector species, like specifically skunks. There are county restrictions as far as like where you can relocate those to.
Okay.
And in some instances, if the animal is injured or malnourished or along those lines, you can take it to a rehabilitator.
Mm-hmm.
So we have licensed rehabilitators on our website. I think we have quite a few of them.
There's a bunch.
So you can always take them to a licensed rehabilitator who, once that animal is deemed healthy, they have lots of places that they release those animals.
Okay, cool. So it's something else that I've kind of thought about that works. You can use it, I guess, outside of traps. but also a lot of times they're in conjunction with traps as scents and attractants.
Yeah.
So can you explain on those a little bit?
Sure. So your main thing with your scents or your lures are you're looking to either trigger a territorial response through scent, or you're looking to trigger a food response with scent. Some species are very territorial. So if you pull the urine off of an alpha male coyote from one area and take it to a spot that he's never been,
Mhm.
and you put that urine out, it's going to really it'll challenge that alpha male at some point in time. Um, Beaver are notorious for this because they use their castor gland
Mhm.
to basically mark their territory, mark their mounds. If you take the castor from a beaver from northeast Oklahoma and go to central Oklahoma, and you use a castor mound set, that's really going to target that territorial response a lot. And then of course, the food-based lures, every animal needs to eat. Um, so those are the mainly the two types of lures that you're going to get. You're going to get those territorial scent based,
Mhm.
and then you're going to get the food based. And then your attractants, you have some curiosities. A lot of people will talk about using um, CDs to
Yep.
hang in the trees, or Christmas tinsel or Christmas ornaments, anything that's shiny or moves in the wind. And that, you especially with bobcats, you're really trying to increase that curiosity. Um, I'm going to get on a spiel about trappers, specifically trappers. I mean, you talk about a trapper in the woods versus I'm not harping on deer hunters, but a deer hunter in the woods. A deer hunter has a deer feeder out 300 yards away or 200 yards away, and that animal walks out to there and they shoot off the feeder. So you're bringing an animal into a deer feeder and you got 200 yards to take care of it. A trapper, we're looking at a 2x2 pan
Yeah.
that we're pulling an animal out of the woods to step on that 2 inch by 2 inch trap pan to fire that trap off. So you really got to know what you're looking at and what to look for to know if there's animals in an area,
Mhm.
and then also how to set that trap in a way that places that animal's foot right there on that trap pan.
Yep.
So
Well, and I've talked to guys too before. They were talking about uh, setting traps out for, and these guys were specifically they were trapping coyotes.
mm,
Is they're like you can find like they were on a trail and set their trap on the trail and couldn't get them caught,
mm,
and they couldn't figure it out. And then they talked to somebody and they were like they'll step around stuff. So he like I forgot what it was exactly, but he put like a stick or something in
mhm,
the middle of the trail,
yep,
set the trap to the side of it. Next day,
yeah.
had that coyote caught.
So I mean, animals themselves, they're very efficient travelers.
Mhm.
They're going to take the path of least resistance. So, and I've seen there's a lot of wrong ways to do things in the trapping world, but there's no right way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that are tried and tested, and some works for others, and some don't, as far as efficiency or that increasing that catch rate. But I've seen people use, step sticks. I've seen people use like little pebbles to
Mhm.
put in there. If you put that in front of your trap pan, that animal's going to step over that, because if it has a nice little area of soft dirt where
Mhm.
that trap pan is and everything else around it, it looks uninviting. It's got, crumpled up leaves. Or one guy in the Northwest that I trap with, he uses it. He calls it his Northwest set, or his Beaver, Oklahoma set. And he'll take sandburrs and he'll put it everywhere around that trap except for on the trap pan. So that animal's going to step in
Yep.
that nice, clean, soft dirt. So, there's a lot of different ways to do things, and none of those are wrong, but there's definitely some unethical things to do that you should avoid doing. But as far as like no right way,
Yeah, there's no foolproof
yeah,
100% guaranteed method. It's a
it's
lot of
whatever works for you.
yep.
Yeah.
Well, and it's I've from talking to guys that have trapped before, that's a big part of it is a lot of it's trial and error. You take stuff you said that people have done before that
Yeah.
have had success, you implement it, and maybe you're somewhat successful, but then you can always kind of experiment with it. You
Mhm.
can play with it, try to figure out tailor it to exactly what you want.
Yeah.
and then a lot of times you can be a lot more successful
Yeah.
that way. Um, well, so we talked about the traps themselves, but like sets, and I guess we kind of got into that a little bit with like your sense and your attractants.
Right.
But is there right and well, we kind of talked about that right and wrong ways to put it. There isn't really a right way. It's just whatever works best.
Right. Whatever works best. And really whatever the sign that you're looking for is showing you.
Hmm.
So if I'm walking on a game trail and I come across, some of the things to look for would be scratch mounds or scat.
Hmm.
Scat's the big one. Especially if you're looking to target bobcats or coyotes. Those are pretty, they don't care. Usually the bobcat probably might be like right off the game trail, but a coyote is just going to stop and drop right there in the middle of the trail. So, I mean, and you can use those things as lures and as an attractant too. But knowing where that animal is traveling and what that animal is doing, if you're on a game trail that's really tight and narrow, you can do a blind set right there.
Hmm.
And a blind set is just setting the trap, bedding the trap, which I mean, that's a whole process. I guess that is one thing that you have to do right. And that's one thing that all trappers can agree on is you have to bed your trap properly. And
What do you mean by that?
so when you bed the you want your trap to be under the surface of the ground, right? So bedding your trap is digging that trap bed out to where it sits flush.
Okay.
And you don't want any wiggle, any movement, because that's when your more curious species like a fox will dig it. I think fox like target trappers during trapping season just to go out and dig up their traps and mess with people. They're really good at it. So if it's not solid, if it's not covered correctly, that's probably one thing that every trapper can agree on is, bedding that trap is the most important thing. So, if you have that narrow game trail, you could set a blind set, which is basically you set the trap or you bed the trap properly, you cover the trap, you let it go.
Okay.
You could put some stop sticks or like step sticks in front of it or behind it or all around it to try and funnel the animal right there to that spot. But no attractants are needed, no lures are needed, because you can see from the sign you got tracks running up and down this game trail that the animal is using.
Yeah, you're not trying to get him to start using it. He's already using it. You're just taking advantage of that.
And in certain areas, like if you're talking like a 2-track road that's cutting through an ag field or something, or cutting through a forested area, and you can see tracks on that 2-track, animal tracks on that 2-track, and you identify it as a coyote or a bobcat or a fox. But, that 2-track is a little too wide to try and funnel it down to a certain area. That's when your lures and your attractants really come in, because you can set a trap off to the side of that 2-track. And you can, at that point in time, you would use backing. So your backing it could be a natural backing. It could be a bundle of grass, of bunch grass, or it could be natural elevation, like an incline. But that keeps the animal from coming at it from the backside or from the side. It really funnels it in that one direction. At that point in time, you'd put your lure, your attractant. Some people will use what's called a flat set. And all it is instead of a blind set where it's just the trap's in the ground, but then you just put an object there. It could be a rock, it could be a T-bone, it could be a bone, it could be a stick, and you could put the lure on the underside of that. You could spray it with urine. You could take some feathers, throw your feathers on it, just anything to get that attention there.
Mm-hmm.
Another set that you could use in place of that flat set would be like a dirt hole.
Okay.
That's my go-to. That's my favorite type of set is a dirt hole set. And it mimics like a mouse burrowing or some prey species burrowing. You just take your trap setter and you just hollow out a hole and you put your lure, your scent lure down in there, and you can put a food lure, you can put a scent lure. But that gets that animal's attention focused right on that hole. And then you put the trap, 7 inches. No, most people say, spread out your thumb and your pinky, and that's how far you set it from the hole.
Okay. Yeah.
And some people will put it on the right side, some people put it on the left side, some people will put it right smack dab in the center. I've never really noticed it making much of a difference, but that's me.
Mhm.
Everybody's different. So I mean, really, everything else is kind of a modification to that flat set or to that dirt hole set. I mean, you can add you can call you can add like a marking stick, like a coyote raised its leg on a stick, and you just spray urine on it, and then another canine species will come and mark that or cover that. So there's a lot of variations, but I mean, those are pretty much your go-tos, your flat set, your blind set, and your dirt hole set.
Okay. Cool. Um, we'll kind of go into the next thing, and it's not really trapping, but it could be very useful for predator management. That'd be calling, right?
Right. And we have a very um healthy predator calling community in Oklahoma.
Hmm.
Um and whether you're using an electronic call or a mouth call, I mean, basically you're just trying to mimic a prey item in distress to get the animals to come to you.
Yeah.
And wherever you are in Oklahoma is probably a different experience than any
Yep.
other place that you've been. Western Oklahoma, where there's in areas where there's not a whole lot of either not a whole lot of elevation change or not a whole lot of vegetation, you're going to be able to see that animal coming for quite a while. But in those areas where there's canyons and elevation change, or get over into eastern Oklahoma or central Oklahoma in the cross timbers, you might not see that animal until it's right there on top of either your box call that you've got
Hmm.
set out, or if you're mimicking the animal,
Yep.
that distress animal. Um, there's people as far as the calls. I mean, you could do all kinds of things. I mean, rabbit in distress, I think, is probably a pretty popular,
It's one I've heard the most. Yeah.
a pretty popular sound to mimic. But that's probably the one thing that I haven't spent as much time doing
Hmm.
as some others. I have gone, and it is a very interesting avenue, a very interesting discipline as far as the outside sports of predator management is concerned, and it's very effective.
Yep.
I mean, you've got a lot of critters in a lot of areas that want to eat something. So I mean, they're going to come up and they're going to do what they do. That's why they're called predators.
Yeah. So, well, and this kind of leads into my next question, and this may be a tough question or maybe an impossible question, but which is best for predator management? Is it going to be trapping? Is it going to be hunting? Is it a combination of the two? Is it?
I really think that that is probably going to depend on what is your goal as the manager,
Okay.
what's your goal as the one managing that property.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and how much time can you commit to it?
Yeah. 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 Time's going to be a big one.
Time's a big thing. I mean, predator hunting or predator calling, you're in it the whole time. Trapping is very passive. I mean, it's very front end loaded. It's very front end heavy as far as your time out there setting your trap line. But after that, it's pretty passive. I mean, you go and you check your trap line every 24-hour period, required by law. And then, after that, I mean, if you have a catch, you harvest your catch or you release the catch, you
Mhm.
remake your set, and you go about your business. Whereas, predator calling, you're there the whole time, actively engaged in the process. Um, and I mean, the application could be both, but I think a lot of that depends on what's your goal for the property and how much time do you have to invest
Yeah.
in that as well.
Well, I think part of it might be species specific too.
Yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot of possums
Yeah.
your distressed rabbit call, um, and it's also gonna depend on what you are comfortable with as the property manager. Um, me personally, I'm more comfortable going out and putting 20 sets out.
Yeah.
Um, but the area that I'm in would probably be, I mean, I look more towards some of those nest predations. I try and keep those at a minimum. I never going to stop at all, but my goal is to at least knock those numbers down. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking for raccoons and skunks and possums,
Yeah.
those notorious nest predators, but I'll definitely go through and go after some of those other species like coyotes and bobcats, which are a little
Mhm.
bit more common to come into your calls.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, so we've kind of covered pretty much everything, right? For the most part. I mean,
But I
without,
think we've touched on
yeah,
we
yes,
haven't covered anything, but we've touched on quite a bit. Yeah.
yeah. Well, so let's just kind of cover some general tips, right? We've touched on a few of these, but like stuff like how to scout.
Mhm.
We kind of talked about where to set up, signs to look for, that kind of things. Like if I'm a new trapper, if I go out and decide I want to trap, what am I looking for?
So, I mean, the first thing to look for if you're walking an area, you want to find the pathways. Like I said, animals are very efficient travelers, so they're going to try and find those wide, nice game trails or the two tracks that are cut through. Most every piece of property in Oklahoma is going to have some type of access for a vehicle, whether it's a side by side or a full, a truck. So walk those. Look for scat. Look for those tracks. Get an idea, get a healthy confidence level for identification of tracks, because that's going to tell you
Yeah.
what those critters are on there. And from some of the stuff that I get, I try and help people all the time with identifying animals either through looking at their scat, looking at their tracks, pictures and videos and all of these things. And sometimes you just can't tell what it is. But, having an idea, at least having somewhat of an idea of what it could be based on the morphology of the track, it definitely helps.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna
because
say that's,
because then you know what type of trap to use, what type of attractants are
mm,
more effective for different species. So
yep. All right. Well, so on that note, well, I think we've kind of covered, well, like you said, we've
yeah,
touched on a lot of stuff because trapping it's a very storied, uh, pursuit.
yeah,
There's a lot of history there, and it's been around a long time. So we could talk all day long
oh yeah.
about it. But where can people go to find out more information about predator control? Like where some resources, videos,
So
whatever.
we do have a fur bearer and trapping segment on our website at wildlifedepartment.com.
Okay.
And right now working on adding to that but instead of reinventing the wheel, we are using some information from the Associated Fish and Wildlife Agencies, AFWA. They have a fur bearer management website that's where your BMPs that I talked about earlier, all that research that was done for the efficacy and the animal well-being, all of that stuff can be found on their fur bearer management website.
Hmm.
Um, so you would have to at that point. I think we have it linked on our website. If not, it will be soon. But you could just Google AFWA fur bearer management and it'll pop up. But there's a lot of research in there about um, the science of trapping management,
Yeah.
and how beneficial it can be, not just in other species management like prey species management, but even fur bearer species. I mean, when you talk about it, it sounds antithetical to say you harvest a species to increase that species overall health, but
Hmm.
when you look especially at like raccoon populations, they're a highly densely populated species, and if we don't regulate their numbers, Mother Nature will, and it's usually through distemper.
Oh, okay.
Um, so for that disease control aspect, trapping is a very important management tool as far as that's concerned, because you've got all of these different avenues of things that could potentially go wrong
Hmm.
in these populations if we don't manage them to the best of our ability. And I think that's probably the biggest part of it. Now it has shifted more towards population management as
Yeah.
opposed to in the mid 1900s there were people making fortunes off of fur.
Yep.
Um,
Well, I think the first billionaire in North America was a beaver trapper. or he was or beaver pelt expert seller or
Yeah.
something like that.
I mean,
Yeah.
well, I mean, you think about it in some of the research that I've done, I've kind of nerded out on the history of Oklahoma and trapping, but there were 19 tons of beaver pelt shipped down the Verdigris River to make it to Louisiana to go to France.
Jeez.
19 tons in 1 year. That's how many beaver for the hat industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, here recently, the hat industry again exploded and beaver prices went up because of Yellowstone.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Everybody wants a Stetson.
Everybody wants a Stetson. So it's really interesting that, you know, even the things that maybe not to the as grand a scale as what fashion used to play in the fur market. Sorry, this is a whole nother rabbit hole. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. You know, the role that fashion used to play in the fur market, it still happens today. You know, I was talking about coyote prices at one point in time were a lot higher than what the normal trends were for the last 20 years. It had like a 2 or 3 year spike. And that's because Canada Goose parkas were using coyote fur for the trim on their parkas. So coyote prices went up. When they stopped doing it, coyote prices went back down to what they historically were, or what the historical trends were. So it's really weird how it still plays a role, even though it's not as grand a scale as what it was.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I think we've touched enough on for today.
Right.
Like I said, man, we could sit here all day and talk about
We could
a million different topics when it comes to trapping, but I think we're going to kind of wrap it up there. I want to thank you for coming out.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Do you want to close this out with a trapping story?
Oh man, I guess. Let's see what would be the best one to say. I guess my first experience with a bobcat, because that was what I was targeting on my property. My first experience with a bobcat, I did not expect because I had just started this whole thing, and I'm lucky enough to have access to 9 acres on a river bottom that I can trap. And going through and looking, and did not expect it at all. Wasn't even paying attention. Almost walked right up on a bobcat in my trap. And you know, it was a nice, beautiful tom, and it was my first bobcat harvest. You know, my daughter was with me, which kind of also amped up the whole. I should have been paying more attention, but you know, having that experience with her there the first time that I harvested a bobcat was pretty cool. And she's 8 now. She was 3 then. So I mean, she just thought that it was really cool that a big kitty was, you know, in the trap. And but even to this day, she's very interested in the management aspect of things. She's always asking me questions. She probably asks better questions than half the phone calls that I get. So being able to share that with my daughter, and hopefully soon with my son, that's probably the coolest part of it all, is just having that knowledge and having those experiences to pass on and to share.
Yep. Going back to that cliche, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Jerrod. Well, like I said, man, thanks for joining us today. Had a great time. Learned a lot. Thank you all for joining us today at home. Like and subscribe if you want to check out some more. We've got a few other episodes if you'd like to check those out. So thank you.